GamerNode.com. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be reviewing another board game, this one from Renegade Games, designer Shem Phillips, S.J. Macdonald, and a follow-up to the North Sea trilogy. We had Shipwrights of the North Sea, Explorers of the North Sea, and of course Raiders of the North Sea, and now we have Architects of the West Kingdom. You can see same art style, same box size, same publisher, same designer, but a little bit different game. So while Raiders of the North Sea, the most popular of the trilogy, was a worker placement game, this one you might want to say is a worker placement game, but in reality it's more of an action investment game, an action improvement game of sorts, because players will start with a whole bunch of workers, and as you place them out into locations on the board, the benefit from placing in that location will grow and grow and grow based on the number of workers you have invested into that action. And players can use all the same places, and also players can round up their opponents working those workers that have been invested into those actions. They can round them up and get rid of them to make other players start back at one again. And it's an interesting cyclical sort of game, and basically what you're trying to do is gather up resources, hire apprentices and various personalities to help you, and build buildings. You're building buildings, and that's the game end trigger. It's a race. It's a race to build the best, most victory point laden stuff. So yeah, that's Architects of the West Kingdom. Let's check it out.
So Architects of the West Kingdom is a fairly simple and straightforward game with a little bit of a twist. Each player will have their own player board, which is mainly just for holding their workers and other players' workers when captured. And the majority of the game happens on the main game board. The board is comprised of a variety of different spaces, mostly large circles that can house as many of each player's workers as you want to put there. There are a few spaces in the black market that can only house a single worker, where only one player can be at a time, and there are some spaces in the guild hall where workers will be placed permanently and therefore lost from a player's worker pool. There's also a group of spaces for apprentice cards near the workshop, where you'll hire those people to help you build your buildings and earn different powers and abilities throughout the game, as well as a stack of building cards near the workshop that you'll draw from in order to build new buildings and push the game toward its eventual end and gain yourself some victory points. Then there's the tax stand, which is essentially a pile of money that's paid into and stolen from, and the prison, which is where players will be sending their opponent's workers as a little bit of a take-that mechanism to stop their momentum. And then lastly, there's the cathedral, which ties into the buildings. So on any given turn, a player will place one of their workers in one of the spaces on the board. So I mentioned earlier that any of these larger spaces can hold any number of workers, and that is a main premise to carry throughout this game. It is that the power of an action, or the power of an action space, is dependent upon the number of your workers that reside there. So in any of the resource gathering spaces, for example, the forest, the quarry, the silversmith, and the mines, you might gain 1 wood for placing 1 worker, but then 2 when you place your second worker there on a later turn. And on the next turn that you come back to the forest and place your third worker, now you're gaining 3. So 1, 2, 3, you've gained 6 in 3 turns. At some place like the workshop, the number of workers lets you hire from either the first, second, third, or fourth column. Or it lets you take 1, 2, 3, 4, however many building cards as you have pairs of workers. At the King's Storehouse, it lets you trade in resources either for virtue on the virtue track or for a more rare resource, marble. And at the tax stand, it just lets you steal from the tax stand again and again, and leave your guys there to be captured. And the way that you capture your opponent's workers to stop this momentum that they're building up by placing their workers out is by going to the town center, a very important part of the game. and the part that makes it really unique. So if you place a worker here, you can round up all of one color of workers from a location, so all of one opponent's workers, and you take them and put them on your player board. Later on, you'll be able to go to the guardhouse and earn some money for sending those to prison. But back at the town center, if you come back there a second time, that lets you round up all the workers of two colors, or in a two-player game, at two locations. And back at the guardhouse, there are other things that you can do as well that are dependent on how many workers. You get a number of actions equal to your workers, and the actions include sending a group of workers for coins, getting your workers out of prison, freeing some of your workers from another player's player board, or paying off a debt. So every place on the board is dependent on the number of workers you have there. The only place where it is a traditional worker placement game is in the black market, where there are 3 spaces where you pay a few coins and lose virtue in order to gain some pretty nice benefits, usually including that rare resource marble. And virtue is important because throughout the game you're managing this virtue track on the side of the board that will translate into positive or negative points later in the game, but will also prevent you from going to the black market and doing bad things if you have too high a virtue, or give you discounts, or prevent you from building at the cathedral, which is kind of a good thing to do if you're on the low end of the virtue track. And then finally, the sort of timer of the game is the guild hall, which is tied directly to that cathedral. Every time you have all of the resources that are required by a building card, and you have the prerequisite apprentices that are required on building cards, which is essentially just have the correct types of apprentices. There are only 3 types, and cards will only require up to 1 each, sometimes none. Then you'll go to the guild hall, pay your resources, make sure you have the correct apprentice symbols in your area, and you'll place a worker down there and gain the immediate benefits or endgame benefits of that building as well as the points. And that advances the game toward the end, because when the guild hall is filled up, the game's over. Now, some of these buildings are kind of hard to complete, so the mechanic that's included here is the cathedral, where you can instead discard any one building and pay a pre-printed amount of resources right there at the cathedral to bump one of your player markers up on the cathedral track, and you'll get points at the end of the game based on where you end up, as well as immediately taking one of the reward cards there at the cathedral at that time. So that's a brief overview of the game. Let's talk about it a little bit further in the review.
So, Architects of the West Kingdom, there it is. I would say it's a very unique game in that it has created this sort of new mechanism where players will not be blocking each other out of action spaces as in traditional worker placement. Everyone has the freedom to go in all those locations, and the tension comes from worrying whether you're going to get to place that next worker on a space that you already have a bunch of workers to take that big reward, or if some player between this turn and your next turn is going to imprison your workers you already have out and make you start back at 1. So it does lack sort of the angst of worrying about whether you're going to get to take an action at all. In traditional worker placement, someone else goes to an action that you want to do and you're locked out. In this one, you're not locked out, but you can be foiled in such a way that you won't get as much of a benefit as you're looking for on your next turn. And as it's a race game, because you are racing to, there's a limited amount of time, because as players build buildings or contribute to the cathedral, they are taking up one more slot each time at the guild hall, and the guild hall is a timer for when it's full. The game is essentially over. One more round and the game's over. So you're trying to build as much as you can up to that point, acquire as many victory points as you can up to that point. So with that race aspect, having an opponent throw that stumbling block in your path by imprisoning your workers, that adds a little bit of tension. But I do feel that it is a little bit looser than your traditional worker placement. And in that sense, it could be good if you prefer less of that tension, or bad if you really thrive on that tension, if that's what makes a worker placement style game interesting to you. So I do think this is an excellent sort of introductory game, although I wouldn't suggest it as a model for the worker placement genre. But you know, disregarding that, just as a game in itself, really very interesting. I do like it a lot. One aspect that I really enjoy is the fact that there are no set rounds. There's no break in the action. The first player starts and you play through to the end of the game, turn by turn, until it's over. It even has the same sort of like Ticket to Ride ending where the player triggers the end of the game and every player, including that player, gets another turn, and it's just continuous from beginning to end. And I like that, and I think it's a lot less to be concerned about. There's no pulling your workers back every single round. You don't put them all out and then take them all back. You know, so it doesn't have that sort of staccato feel. I do like the way that the game resets itself in a way. So every time you hit one of those black market resets, or if players use that one little area, the black market area, that is more of a traditional worker placement where you block each other off. There are only 3 spaces. When those are full and you send everybody to prison and people are punished based on who they have in prison out of their pool of workers, I think that's a good thing to always be mindful of. It adds a little bit more concern. And I think this game also really benefits from the maximum player count. You know, the more players in this game, the better, because there is more opportunity and more concern, I should say, about players imprisoning other players' workers, and it works best at a full player count in that regard. As for negative commentary, I would say that at the end of the day, it is sort of, I want to say, just, I'm going to use the word just, but you know, collecting resources to build buildings the fastest for the most part. I mean, you're concerned about your opponents and you have to collect those helper characters, but for the most part, you're really just doing that so that you have the prerequisites to build the buildings in your hand and get those done as quickly as possible, to discard those cards that you... Actually, you know, another thing that I really like is that you have those buildings, but you can decide, hey, I don't think I'm gonna be able to build this one, so let me discard it and pay at the cathedral and build up there. So that gives you a little bit of flexibility there. So overall, I think the game does... The design was focused on greater flexibility. I mean, I can't say for sure, I didn't interview Shem, but to me it seems that the design was around this sort of idea of traditional worker placement is too constricting, too restrictive of players, can cause a little bit more frustration. This one opens that up, gives you a little bit more freedom to move, but throws back in a sort of take that element. So it opens it up for a sort of different audience, and I think it does a great job. I think, you know, I prefer this to something like Stone Age. If you have the right player count, I would say that I am not a huge fan of this one at 2-player. I played the solo game and I wasn't really that into it. It was just me moving stuff around and, oh, I'm done. Check the score. Oh, I won. Oh, I lost. You know, it's like there wasn't a whole lot to it for me at solo, and at 2-player it was missing what I found was there at 4 players. And at 4 players it was really cool. So all in all, I'm gonna go ahead and give this one a 4 out of 5 on the GamerNode scale. That is a commendable title, and I would definitely recommend if this is the weight you're looking for, then this is a good choice in that weight, and I would recommend picking it up. That's it. That's the review. Thanks for watching. My name's Eddie Inzauto. I'm the editor-in-chief of GamerNode.com. You can check us out at facebook.com/GamerNode, Instagram.com/GamerNode or just at GamerNode. I really like posting those photos there. Twitter at GamerNode. And of course on the website GamerNode.com. And in addition to that, please do hit that like button and subscribe and hit that bell notification icon right here on YouTube if you like the videos and want to see everything that we publish as it comes out. And keep an eye out for the next one. Until that time, you guys have fun out there.